right, so let's dive into this whole Bittensor hypertensor thing. You've heard the buzz, you've seen the white papers, but as an investor, you need to know, does hypertensor really live up to the hype?
And the challenge is that both platforms, they operate in this world of decentralized AI, which can feel like a whole new language sometimes.
Totally. So we're going to use an analogy you're probably familiar with, shopping malls.
Yeah.
Let's imagine Bittensor is like a well-established shopping mall with 32 distinct stores, or in this case, subnets.
Right.
Each subnet offers a specialized AI service, kind of like how you've got your shoe stores, your clothing boutiques, your food courts all under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and the currency of this Bittensor mall, it's TAO, the token that fuels the whole ecosystem.
Right. And we know from the BIT001 dynamic TAO document that the distribution of TAO to these subnets, it's pretty clever.
It is.
The more popular or in-demand a subnet services are, the more TAO it receives.
Right.
It's all about rewarding the stores that are attracting the most shoppers.
Yeah, it's a dynamic system. It's designed to ensure that resources are allocated to the most valuable AI services. The document highlights how the relative prices of each subnet services, they influence this TAO distribution.
Okay, but here's where things get interesting. What if some store owners in this Bittensor mall decide to get a little sneaky? Instead of stocking their own unique products, they just peek at their competitors' inventory and copy it. That's essentially the problem of weight copying.
Yeah.
That's outlined in the BT Weight Copier 29 May 2024.pdf document.
Yeah, it's a real concern because it undermines the whole point of a decentralized AI network,
Right.
which is to have diverse and unique contributions.
For sure.
Imagine going to a mall where every store sells the exact same things.
Right.
It wouldn't be very exciting or efficient.
Not at all. So how does Bittensor try to prevent these copycat store owners from kind of ruining the fun?
Well, they've implemented a mechanism called commit reveal
Okay.
to make it more difficult to simply duplicate the winning strategies.
Okay, break that down for us. What does commit reveal actually entail?
Okay, so imagine it like this. Instead of openly displaying their new inventory, stores in the Bittensor Mall have to submit a secret list to the mall management first. This list is hidden from everyone else so no one can immediately copy it.
So it's like a surprise unveiling.
Exactly. Only after a certain delay do the stores reveal their actual inventory. This makes it harder for copycats to simply mimic the most successful shops. The document goes into detail about how this commit reveal process affects validator dividends and how adjusting the immunity period can deter copying.
Let's be honest, even with these measures in place, the Bittensor Mall might start to feel a bit cramped, right? Especially with the AI market exploding and everyone wanting a piece of the action.
That's a valid point, and that's where Hypertensor enters the scene.
Okay, so if Bittensor is our bustling shopping mall, what exactly is Hypertensor in this analogy?
Think of Hypertensor as a sprawling AI metropolis. It's not just one mall, it's an entire city with multiple interconnected districts, each specializing in a different aspect of AI.
Whoa, now we're talking. So instead of being limited to 32 stores, we now have a whole city with endless possibilities.
Exactly. And that's precisely what the Hypertensor, a decentralized, incentivized, and democratized Layer 1 artificial intelligence economy white paper outlines.
Yeah.
It describes a vastly more expansive and scalable network compared to Bittensor, capable of accommodating a far wider range of AI services and participants.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal here. But some investors might be thinking, hold on, a whole metropolis. That sounds incredibly complex and maybe even a bit risky. What would you say to those who are hesitant to leave the familiarity of our Bittensor Mall?
It's understandable to have some reservations, but Hypertensor's complexity is actually its strength. It's designed to be a much more secure, resilient, and ultimately a more rewarding ecosystem.
Interesting.
And that's what we'll dive into next. Welcome back. So we've established that if Bittensor is our familiar shopping mall, Hypertensor is like a sprawling AI metropolis.
Right.
But what makes this metropolis a potentially better investment?
Yeah, I mean, bigger doesn't always mean better, right?
Yeah.
Some investors might actually prefer the simplicity and stability of our Bittensor Mall.
True. But let's remember that the AI landscape, it's evolving rapidly.
Right.
Can a single mall really accommodate the sheer scale and diversity of this emerging AI market?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess a sprawling metropolis offers more room for growth and specialization.
Precisely. And that's where Hypertensor's unique architecture comes into play.
Okay.
Unlike Bittensor, which relies on an existing blockchain, Hypertensor has its own dedicated Layer 1 blockchain, purpose-built for AI.
Okay, I'm curious about this dedicated blockchain. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, think of it like this. The Bittensor Mall, it has to rely on the city's existing infrastructure,
Okay.
like roads and power lines,
Right.
which it shares with everyone else.
Right.
Hypertensor, on the other hand, it has its own dedicated infrastructure,
Sure.
designed specifically for the needs of its AI residents.
So it's like having a private power grid and transportation system optimized for AI applications.
Exactly. This gives Hypertensor much tighter control over security, scalability, and performance.
That makes sense. But let's talk about security for a second. We discussed the weight copying problem in Bittensor. How does Hypertensor address this issue in its sprawling metropolis?
Hypertensor tackles this head-on with a combination of innovative mechanisms. Remember, proof of inference, or POI.
Vaguely. It sounded pretty complex.
It is, but it's essential for understanding how Hypertensor ensures honesty and quality control.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. In the Bittensor Mall, anyone can claim to have a certain product in stock,
Right.
even if they don't.
Yeah.
But in Hypertensor, every store has to provide proof that they actually have what they're selling.
So it's like a verification system that prevents stores from making false claims.
Exactly. And the way POI works is quite ingenious. It requires nodes in the network to not only submit their results,
Okay.
but also prove that they arrived at those results. Using the correct AI model and processes, it's like having a built-in quality control inspector in every store, making sure everything's up to standard.
That sounds incredibly robust.
Yeah.
But what about the incentives? How does Hypertensor encourage people to actually participate in this whole POI system?
Well, remember how in Bittensor, the more popular stores get more TAO?
Right.
Hypertensor takes this concept to the next level.
Okay.
It combines POI with a stake-based consensus mechanism.
Okay.
This means that participants have to put up a stake, a certain amount of their own tokens, to validate transactions and earn rewards.
So it's like a security deposit.
Precisely. And the more stake you have, the more influence you have in the network. But here's the key. If you try to cheat the system,
Yeah.
you risk losing a portion of your stake.
Ah, so there's a real financial incentive to play by the rules and maintain the integrity of the network.
Exactly. And this stake-based system combined with POI, it creates a powerful deterrent against weight copying and other forms of malicious behavior.
Okay. I'm starting to see how Hypertensor is addressing some of the limitations of the Bittensor model. But let's talk about governance. I mean, managing a sprawling AI metropolis can't be easy.
Right.
How does Hypertensor ensure that decisions are made fairly and effectively?
That's where subnet democracy comes in. Remember, Hypertensor is not just one big centralized entity. It's a network of interconnected subnets,
Right.
each with its own specialized focus.
Right, kind of like different districts within a city. But how does democracy work in this context?
Well, each subnet in Hypertensor has its own governance structure.
Okay.
The community within each subnet has the power to vote on proposals, elect representatives, and essentially shape the direction of their own district.
So it's like having local governments within the larger AI metropolis.
Exactly. This decentralization of power, it helps ensure that no single entity can control the entire network, making Hypertensor much more resilient and adaptable to change. The white paper goes into detail about how these voting mechanisms and checks and balances work, ensuring that the system is both democratic and resistant to manipulation.
This sounds promising. But let's be real. Democracy can be messy.
Yeah.
What happens if there's a disagreement within a subnet? Or what if a powerful group tries to influence the voting process?
That's a valid concern. And to mitigate these risks, Hypertensor has implemented additional layers of security and accountability.
Okay.
For example, they have a system of fault proofs, which allows anyone to submit evidence of a node behaving dishonestly.
So it's like a whistleblower system for the AI metropolis.
Exactly. This helps prevent bad actors from gaining too much power within a subnet. And to further address potential governance challenges, Hypertensor has a multi-layered dispute resolution process
Right.
that involves community mediators, expert panels, and even the possibility of appealing to a higher-level governing body.
So it's like having a judicial system built into the AI city's infrastructure.
Precisely. The goal is to create a fair and transparent governance system that encourages participation, protects the rights of all stakeholders, and ensures the long-term stability and growth of the Hypertensor ecosystem.
All of this sounds incredibly complex.
Yeah.
But also quite compelling. I'm starting to see how Hypertensor is not just about building a bigger platform, but about creating a more robust, secure, and ultimately a more democratic foundation for the future of AI.
And that's what truly sets Hypertensor apart. It's not just about technology. It's about creating a sustainable and equitable AI ecosystem
Right.
that benefits everyone involved.
Okay. I'm definitely intrigued. But as an investor, I'm always looking for concrete evidence of potential returns. Does Hypertensor deliver on that front?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll delve into Hypertensor's innovative incentive structure and analyze what it means for investors like you.
All right, we've journeyed from that bustling Bittensor shopping mall to the sprawling Hypertensor metropolis. We've seen how Hypertensor tackles security governance. But now let's get down to brass tacks. What's the potential return on investment?
That's the question on every investor's mind, right? And while past performance it doesn't guarantee future results, Hypertensor's unique approach to incentivizing participation, it certainly paints an interesting picture.
We know that Bittensor rewards subnets with TAO based on demand. What does Hypertensor do differently?
Well, Hypertensor takes a multifaceted approach. Remember that stake-based consensus mechanism we talked about? Well, it's not just about security. It's also about earning rewards.
So just by holding and staking Hypertensor's native token, investors can earn a passive income.
Exactly. It's similar to earning interest on a traditional bank deposit. But in this case, you're contributing to the security and stability of a decentralized AI network.
Okay.
And the more tokens you stake, the greater your potential rewards.
That's pretty straightforward. But are there other ways to earn within the Hypertensor ecosystem?
Absolutely. Hypertensor rewards participants for a variety of contributions, not just staking.
Right.
For example, you can earn rewards by hosting and running AI models on the network.
So if you have the computational resources, you can essentially rent out your processing power to the Hypertensor network and get paid for it.
Precisely. It's like owning a store in the AI metropolis.
Right.
And earning rent from businesses that need space to operate.
Makes sense.
And remember, proof of inference, that quality control system.
Yeah.
Well, those who participate in the PI process also earn rewards for their contribution to ensuring the accuracy of the network.
It's interesting how Hypertensor incentivizes various roles within its ecosystem, not just those who hold the most tokens.
Right. It's about creating a more equitable and sustainable economy where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and benefit. And there's even a reward system for detecting and reporting malicious behavior.
So you're telling me that if I spot someone trying to cheat the system, like those copycat store owners in Bittensor,
Yeah.
I can actually get rewarded for reporting them.
Exactly. It's like having a neighborhood watch program where citizens are rewarded for helping maintain the safety and security of their community.
This all sounds promising,
Yeah.
but I have to ask, what are the risks? I mean, no investment is without its downsides.
Of course. And with any emerging technology, especially in the decentralized space, there are inherent risks.
Sure.
The biggest one, perhaps, is adoption.
You mean, will enough people actually use and invest in Hypertensor for it to succeed?
Exactly. Building a thriving AI metropolis, it requires a critical mass of participants.
Yeah.
Developers building AI models, users accessing those models, and investors providing the financial fuel.
Right.
If Hypertensor doesn't attract enough of these players, its growth could be stunted.
So it's a bit of a gamble, betting on the future potential of Hypertensor versus the established presence of Bittensor.
It's certainly a calculated risk. And, as with any investment, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what excites me about Hypertensor is that it's not just trying to build a slightly better platform. It's aiming to create a fundamentally different paradigm for AI.
A paradigm shift. That's a bold statement. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about how most AI development happens today.
Okay.
It's largely controlled by big tech companies with vast resources and closed systems.
Right.
Hypertensor, on the other hand, is building an open, decentralized platform where anyone can contribute, collaborate, and benefit from the advancements in AI.
So it's like democratizing AI, taking it out of the hands of a few powerful corporations and making it accessible to everyone.
Precisely. And that's a vision worth investing in, don't you think? Not just for potential financial returns,
Right.
but for the broader societal impact it could have.
I have to admit, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
So final thoughts for our listeners. Those who are considering dipping their toes into this exciting but uncharted territory of decentralized AI.
Do your research. Understand the risks and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. But also, don't be afraid to be part of something revolutionary. Hypertensor is still in its early stages, but it has the potential to change the world as we know it.
And that's what makes this space so captivating. We're witnessing the birth of a new era in AI. And whether you're an investor, a developer, or simply someone curious about the future, This is a journey worth following closely.
Exactly. The AI revolution is just beginning, and Hypertensor might just be one of the key players shaping its trajectory.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into Hypertensor, from its technical underpinnings to its potential impact on the future of AI. We hope you found this exploration informative and thought-provoking.
As always, we encourage you to continue exploring, stay curious, and ask critical questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.